Hello friends, welcome back. Myself Pushpender Singh, and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So today we have 13th of July 2021, and these lectures are basically useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination, which is conducted by the UPSC, alright, as well as other government competitive examinations. You can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures, which are uploaded on the YouTube on the day-to-day basis, and you can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. So let's begin with the lecture for 30 July 2021. Okay, so first news is all about the Nepal signs a pact with SJVN, that is Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited. Okay, so Nepal Investment Board basically have signed a pact with the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited, right, for the purpose of Arun Hydroelectric Power Project. This Arun Hydroelectric Power Project is located specifically in the Nepal, in the eastern Nepal, to develop around 679 megawatt of hydroelectric power, right? And it's a very important pact or MOU with the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited, who have tremendous expertise of generation of this hydroelectric power project, right? So it will help or it will assist the Nepal in generation of this 680 megawatt of electricity. Okay, so basically the India's state-owned Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited, which is basically the second mega project undertaken by the southern neighbor, specifically with assistance with the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited. Okay, so it is after Arun 3 hydroelectric power project, right? The lower Arun hydro project is expected to cost around 1.3 billion US dollars, right? And it will be the single biggest, largest foreign investment, right, in this project, specifically in lower Arun hydroelectric power project as per 2007 estimate, right? Prior to this project, right, India is building already 900 megawatt of the Arun 3 project. Okay, so India was involved in the construction of this project at the estimated cost of around 1.04 US billion dollars. Okay, so that was the cost that was involved specifically that project, and that was specifically the name called Arun Hydroelectric Power Project. That shows that it is basically there on the Arun River, which flows through the Nepal India border, and it is basically specifically located in the Sukwamba district, right? Sukwaswa district in basically in Nepal. Okay, now this have been signed as the Arun Hydro project, which lies in the Himalayan nation of the Nepal. The project will be built by India, right, specifically on BOOT model, that is build, own, operate and transfer. So it will be built by India, right? It will be owned by India for some time, it will operate, and then after some time it will be transferred back to the Nepal. So it will be the BOOT model that will be adopted by the India for the purpose of the construction of this project. And this project will have some reservoir or the dam, right, which will have the tailways for the development of a hydroelectric power project. And you will have the river that re-enters through the lower Arun project, specifically for this project. And the current installed capacity for the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited is around 2016 megawatt. So it is basically aiming at to increase the production capacity to 25,000 megawatt by 2040 with the help of these projects. Okay, so Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam is basically a mini Ratna company under the Ministry of Power, Government of India. It is nothing but a joint venture between the Government of India and Government of Himachal Pradesh. So it is basically incorporated in 1998. Okay, and this company, specifically the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited, is basically a very fast emerging company, and it become the major power player specifically in the country. And it is already successfully incorporating or operating the country's almost 1500 megawatt of the Nathpa Jagri hydropower station. okay, which is also located in the Himalayan state. So, with the incorporation of this Arun 3 hydropower project, it will have the tremendous importance for this Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited for the purpose of increasing the capacity and for ultimate aiming at to be the largest hydroelectric power generation company in the country by incorporating around 25,000 megawatt of electricity by 2040. Right, so it will be a huge, development for the purpose of hydroelectric power generation. Next, the massive solar storm may hit the Earth. So here, recently, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, this is the USA's premier space agency, have recently been informed that the Earth could hit or Earth could be impacted by the powerful high-speed solar storm. Right, this high-speed solar storm is originated from basically the sun, and it is approaching the Earth at a speed of around 1.6 million kilometers per hour. So it is approaching the Earth with that very high speed. And as you know that these storms are operated or originated from the sun's atmosphere and will have very significant impact on the Earth magnetic field. It may have the impact on the communication systems, specifically on the Earth also. Okay, so this solar storm that we are talking originated from the sun's atmosphere is expected to, lash the Earth today, and that can cause the major impact on the communication infrastructure, the transmission infrastructure across the world, and it is likely to disrupt the satellite signals across the world, as well as some sort of a communication networks across the world, as well as it will also interfere the GPS system or GPS navigation, the mobile phone networks, as well as the satellite TV. Okay, all will get impacted, and it can also impact the power transmission also, as informed by the NASA. And the solar storms are basically the huge burst of the charged particles, okay, that are basically, erupted from the sun's surface, that are ejected from the sun's atmosphere into the space. Okay, and the solar storms are having their roots in, the 11-year cycle, that shifts the polarity of the sun's magnetic field. So that basically, revolve around 11-year cycle. Every 11 year you will have that magnetic storm that basically shift the magnetic field of the sun. So the magnetic field at work on the sun get tangled during this process and can basically push out such type of storms, sending some sort of a plasma into the outer space, and that can potentially trigger, the storm on the Earth's surface. So most powerful the geomagnetic storm or this type of solar storm was ever recorded in 1859. Right, it was recorded, and at that point of the time, the telegraph lines, various satellite operations were basically stopped functioning. Okay, and that type of storm they hit today, and that can cut power to the millions of the people across the world. So let's see what would be the impact of such magnetic storm or solar storm that is originated from the sun's surface. Okay. Next, the drink made up of, the genetically modified rice vaccine. So here, it is the first time that the scientists in the Japan have developed a new vaccine drink. Right, this new vaccine drink to protect against the cholera, which is a disease. Right, it has been made by grinding up these genetically modified grains of rice. So the first human trial, right, that has shown the tremendous progress or tremendous improvement in the immune response, right, according to the report which was published in the Lancet journal, right, and this what we known as the drink made up of the genetically modified rice vaccine is have been named as the Mucorice CTV, right, in the phase 1 of the clinical trial of the vaccine, right, which was conducted at the University of Tokyo in Japan, as well as the Chiba University in Japan, okay, have shown no side effects of this vaccine, and the trials for that purpose was conducted between 23rd June and 31st of May 2015 and 16 in that respect. And the Mucorice CTV vaccine is stable at room temperature, and which will make it a potential vaccine to be distributed easier than the traditional vaccines, because it can stable at the room temperature, and which often need some sort of a cold storage chains to transfer such type of vaccines. And the cholera bacteria that we are talking against, the controlling of this cholera, which are spread most often by the drinking water, okay, which is contaminated by the seaways. So without medical attention, the cholera can kill, different peoples through the dehydration, through the diarrhea, right? Specifically, the younger people get killed. And the researchers basically grew these rice plants, or genetically modified rice plants, in basically in the hydroponic plant farm, okay, specifically in the University of Tokyo and the Chiba University, okay, which ensures the vaccine remains uncontaminated, right, because of growing of this the genetically modified plants specifically in the hydroponic form. So it will be ensuring that no such contamination will occur. And the plants were basically isolated from the natural environment in this hydroponic farm, okay, and the plants produced this, there's some sort of seeds, these edible grains of the rice that can store some sort of antigen in the droplets, which are called the protein bodies, right, and with a membrane that are made up of fat, which can basically use for the purpose of the production of these vaccines, okay, for the purpose of containing this cholera across the world. Next, you have the suborbital flight. So it's a most important, the news which have been flashing out. So the Virgin Group founder, Mr. Richard Branson, had become the first billionaire to fly and to the edge of the space, and he came back to the Earth, right, riding, it's his own the Virgin Galactic spacecraft in the suborbital flight. So let us understand why this Virgin Group founder, Mr. Richard Branson, have moved to the edge of the space, and how could this suborbital flight have completed and successfully completed its journey in the own Virgin, Galactic spacecraft that was also in the suborbital flight. So let us understand what is this significance of this suborbital flight and why this suborbital flight is in the news. So suborbital flight is something that is basically glided with the edge, that will be glided with the assistance of the engine to the edge of the universe, and then there won't be any horizontal push, and the plane or the spacecraft may just glide its own, its own velocity to the runway. So that is something to the suborbital flight. So when an object travels at the horizontal speed of around 28,000 kilometers per hour or more, that speed is needed, okay, it basically gets into the orbit once and it is above the atmosphere. So that type of satellites need to reach, right, if they are basically going to reach to that threshold speed of around 28,000 kilometers per hour to reach to the orbit of the Earth, right. So such a satellite will be accelerating towards the Earth due to the gravity. Once they reach to the edge of the Earth, right, to the edge of the universe, or sorry, to the edge of the space specifically, and its horizontal movement is fast enough to offset the downward movement because of, the gravity, or because of the force of the gravity. So it moves along the circular path, right. So any object, right, which is traveling slower than this 28,000 kilometers per hour must eventually return to the Earth. Otherwise, if any object which is above this 28,000 kilometers per hour, right, which is a threshold speed in order to orbit the Earth, right, such a satellite would obviously accelerating, in the orbit. But those satellites or those spacecraft which are traveling with lesser than 28,000 kilometers per hour the speed must eventually return to the Earth, okay. And these such orbits or these such flights, which are in the some sort of a, the spacecraft or rocket or whatever you may call it, okay, such type of the flights are known as a suborbital flight, because they will not be traveling fast enough to orbit the Earth once they reach there. So they just touch that orbit and just come down, touch and come down, but that speed won't be enough, or the speed won't be suffice to basically orbit the Earth. You are getting my point. So here the horizontal movement is not fast enough to offset the downward movement. You're getting my point? So that horizontal push was not there, so that they can neutralize, or that horizontal push can neutralize the downward movement because of the gravity. So definitely if the speed is lesser, the spacecraft will eventually come down. Such a trip, would allow the space travelers to experience in a few minutes the weightlessness. That is, when you reach to the space, or when you reach to the edge of the space, suddenly the horizontal push was stopped, and you feel at that moment, before just started gliding back to the earth, you feel the weightlessness. That is some sort of an experience, or the space travelers would like to experience specifically at that flight. Okay, now you can take an example. For example, you can take a ball, right? You can throw that ball in the air. What will happen, right? Let's say if that ball speed is around 28,000 kilometers per hour. You can say that is around 8 meters per second, right? The ball you throw, for example, you take the ball and you throw that ball. The ball ultimately reach to that height, right? It will basically fly in an arc. So I'm just throwing that ball right over there, and the ball is thrown, and the ball will ultimately reach to that height. Okay, and the ball will fly ultimately in the arc, and entire kinetic energy is swapped with the potential energy. At that instance, it will lose its vertical motion, right? Until that point, it is moving vertically, right? So at that point, it lost its vertical motion, and momentarily before returning to the earth under the influence of gravity. So it started basically returning back to the earth. Okay, so such suborbital flights is like this cricket ball, or is like any sort of a cricket ball, right? They're traveling fast enough to reach to the edge of the space, so that you consider at the edge of the space. Okay, but yet without enough horizontal push, so there won't be a horizontal velocity to go into the orbit. An object which travels as fast as 40 kilometers per hour, right, which can achieve this escape velocity. So if the velocity is almost 40,000 kilometers per hour, okay, that object will never return to earth, and that is basically also known as the escape velocity. You might have heard, or you might have studied in the 12th class physics. If the velocity of an object is around 28,000 kilometers per hour, right, it will basically orbit around the earth. If the velocity of an object is lesser than 28,000 per hour, it will basically undergo the suborbital flight, and it will glide back to the earth. So this is what the data regarding the physics. Now what is the buzz? So the Branson and the Jeff Bezos, right, the founder of Amazon, right, they have the plans to kick off the private space flight, right, where the people who are basically love to travel to the space, right. Even the several companies are looking for the customers to go to this suborbital flight or to the orbital journeys. So even the Branson Virgin Galactic, which is a spacecraft, right, around 600 people have already paid, right, for the purpose for this suborbital flight. And the Bezos, the Blue Origin, right, which is the reusable rocket, is yet to announce the commercialization plans. But the Branson, the Virgin Galactic have already made this journey. The Jeff Bezos, the Blue Origin, that is basically a rocket name or the spacecraft name, has yet to start a journey. Now there are a lot of safety concerns also with that suborbital flight, right. With that Branson's flight came 7 years after the company's first rocket was basically failed, and during that flight it was crashed, right, which killed one pilot on the board. The other pilot was basically survived because of the parachute. So the current rocket is not certified by the US Federal Aviation Administration, right, which is prohibited of doing any such suborbital flight until 2023. But this is just an experimental flight, and the US government does not want to burden the companies like Virgin Atlantic or the Blue Origin to during their their learning period, right. So they could innovate themselves so that safety concerns can be mitigated, or safety concern can be alleviated for the purpose of that. So here you can say that if you have orbital space flight, the altitude is around 150 miles plus, and the speed should be 17,500 miles per hour. Okay, and the age of the space is defined around by 100 kilometers. Right. So if any spacecraft is reaching 200 kilometers, that means you can say that it has reached to the age that is around 62 miles above the Earth's surface. Right. If you have the suborbital flight or suborbital space flight, that means the particular the orbital plane or the spacecraft have reached to 100 kilometers. That is the space age or the age of the space. Okay, that is around altitude of around 62 miles or corresponding to around 100 kilometers with a speed of around 2500 miles per hour, that is correspond to around less than 28 thousands kilometer per hour. Right, that is something you can say that. Right, and the commercial air traffic that we use, right, while the transportation or while moving from one place to another place, they hardly fly on the altitude of around 8 miles. Right, the speed is around 600 miles per hour. Right, that is the topmost speed or the cruise speed in that respect. Okay. Next is the retail direct scheme for the GSAC. So it's a very important the news. The RBI has announced the new scheme under which the retail investors will be allowed to open the retail direct gilt account. Okay, these retail investors will be allowed to open these retail direct gilt accounts, right, directly with the central bank. So now let us understand what is this retail direct gilt accounts. So it's a very important, right. The scheme is one-stop solution to facilitate the investment, right, specifically in the government securities by the individual investors or by the retail investors in the government securities. So under this the retail direct gilt accounts scheme, right, the accounts can be opened through a dedicated online portal. So there is online portal, right, through that the accounts can be opened, right, which will provide the registered users and access to the issuance of the government securities directly, right, in that matter, and they can basically invest in those government securities. Now let us understand what is this gilt account, why we are talking about this gilt account or retail gilt account. First let us understand what is gilt account. So the gilt account is any sort of account which is open and maintained for holding the government security. So specifically for government securities, such type of account is open for the purpose of holding or maintaining such securities by an entity or by a person. Here the persons are retail investors, right, which could also include the person which are residing outside the country also, right, as they are permitted as a custodian by the Reserve Bank of India. So they can directly open their account, that is a gilt account, for the purpose of maintaining and holding of government securities. Now let us understand another task, that what is this government securities or the GSAC. I have already explained you long back in my lectures also, right. The government securities are basically the debt instrument. They are the debt instruments which are issued by the government, right, to borrow the money. So they are the debt instrument in the form of government securities which are issued by the government for the purpose of borrowing the money. Okay, there are two types of categories, or there are two types of government securities or GSACs. The first is T-bills, which is also known as the treasury bills. They are basically the short-term instrument, right? They are basically the short-term instrument, right? And which basically matures in 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. So there are three windows for the maturity. And another is basically also known as the dated security. That is the second type of the government securities. They are basically the long-term instrument which matures between 5 years to 40 years. So there is long period of the maturity for the purpose, right. So here it's a very important that the government securities are not tax-free. First of all, they are generally considered the safest form of the investment, because definitely they are backed by the government. So the risk of the default is almost nil, because they are sovereignly backed, they are backed by the government. But definitely they are not totally risk free. They are subjected to the fluctuations of the interest rate, right. That is something to be understood in that aspect. Now what is the benefit of these retail investors and investing in government securities? So here the small investors can invest indirectly in these government securities, either treasury bills or the dated securities, by buying some sort of a mutual funds through certain policies which are assured through the life insurance firms. Okay, and definitely the government also want to encourage the direct investment. The government and RBI have taken several steps in the recent year to encourage the investors to invest in government securities. So these retail investors, they are allowed to place some sort of a bids in the auctioning of the government bonds or the government securities, right, through some sort of a demat account or through some sort of a that gilt account that has been opened. So the stock exchanges act as the aggregators or the facilitators of any sort of a the retail bids for the purpose of buying of these government securities or GSEC securities under this scheme. The next, you have the Kongu Nadu region of Tamil Nadu. This is in the news because recently inducted some of the ministers from the Tamil Nadu, right? Specifically, the western part of the state, which have been specifically named as the regional name, which is also known as the Kongu Nadu, which has sparked the controversy in the Tamil Nadu. Specifically, the current ruling party of the Tamil Nadu, that is AIADMK, it is led by the Stalin, right, who is the son of the great Chief Minister Karunanidhi, right. Now, what is happening is that this Kongu Nadu region, which is currently located to the western Tamil Nadu, right, the minister which has sparked the controversy have basically spread these rumors about the separate state in the form of the Kongu Nadu. So AIADMK led by the Stalin have specifically said that the BJP and its allies will not be succeed in basically dividing the state in the form of Kongu Nadu, right. Here the Kongu Nadu is something to be understood. It's not a place, right, with a pin code, definitely. So the name given something informally to that place. So it is commonly used for part of a western Tamil Nadu, some part of the western Tamil Nadu. In the Tamil literature, right, in the Tamil literature that you have heard about, the Sangam, right. So in the Tamil literature, it was referred to one of the 5 regions. So in the Tamil literature, the 5 regions are basically mentioned, okay, specifically those regions which are surrounded or which are encompassed by the Tamil Nadu. Among these 5 regions, the one region is known as the Kongu Nadu. Now there is some rumors about the separation of this Kongu Nadu from Tamil Nadu, okay, and there were mentions about this Kongu Nadu also in the Sangam literature as a separate territory, right, and this name basically derived from the Kongu Belelala Gaundar. This Kongu Belelala Gaundar was basically an OBC community which are having the presence in this Kongu Nadu. So you will have OBC community specifically which resides in this region. But you must also understand this Kongu Nadu, which we are specifically about the western part of the state, is basically includes some sort of a prominent businesses or the industrial hubs. Specifically, it's the most flourished part of the Tamil Nadu, right? And is there any ground or allegation to the plant bifurcation? Definitely, some rumors have originated in the social media, in the platforms, but it is unbased assumption that unlike the Tamil Nadu and the Uttarakhand, where the demand for the separate state was there since long, so there was no such demand or discussions about the separate state called the Kongu Nadu in the modern political history of the Tamil Nadu. So the debate, therefore, you can say that it lacks any sort of a political context or the social context in that respect. So here you can say that the Kongu Nadu, which is one of the 5 regions which was basically specified in the Tamil Nadu literature. So that specifically, this is the map of the Tamil Nadu, right. Here the red is basically the Tamil Nadu, okay. This is being specifically been enlarged map, and what we are talking about, this region is the western portion of the Tamil Nadu. This region is specifically termed as Kongu Nadu, okay. Next, the lightning. As you have seen that at least 30 people were killed, right, in the separate incidents of the lightning in the various parts of the country in the last 24 hours. So as you know that India sees almost 2000 to 2500 deaths or lightning deaths every year on an average, and lightning is the biggest contributor to the accidental deaths due to the natural causes or due to the natural, the consequences. So here the monsoon, which is making a slow revival over the several parts of the India, right? There is a rise of this lightning linked deaths in the country, right? And the lightning remains among the least studied and atmospheric phenomena in the country, right? And what is this lightning? Lightning is a basically a very rapid and a massive discharge of electricity in the atmosphere that that you might have seen also, some of which is directly towards the Earth's surface. So that rapidly and massive discharge of the electricity is specifically directed towards the Earth, and these discharges are generally in the form of the giant moisture bearing clouds that are roughly 10 to 12 kilometers tall, right? The base of these clouds typically lies around 1 to 2 kilometers from the Earth's surface. For example, you can say this is the giant cloud, okay, and this is what we are talking, and this is, let's say, this is the Earth's surface, right? This is the Earth's surface. Now this base of this giant cloud is hardly 1 to 2 kilometers from the Earth's surface. This is cloud that we are talking. This is a giant cloud through which the sudden discharge of this electricity or sudden discharge of this the massive electricity into the atmosphere have been occurred. And the top of this cloud is around 12 to 13 kilometers. So that is the very long cloud, right? Around 12 to 13 kilometers long. The temperature towards the top of these clouds are in the range of around, you can say, minus 35 to minus 45 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature range at the top of this cloud. So what happens is, as the water vapor moves upward through the cloud, the falling temperature causes it to condense, right, through that process, and the heat is generated in this condensation process, that is called the latent heat of condensation, right, which pushes some sort of a molecules of the water to further up, right, and which has ultimately led to the collisions which trigger the release of some electrons, and in this process the sparks of the electricity is generated, and as the free electrons cause more collisions, right, more electrons and a chain of reaction ensues, and that process that has resulted to the positively charged and the negatively charged ions that are comes into contact, and that makes some sort of a thunder. So here the electric potential difference between these two layers that we are talking about is very, very huge. That electric potential difference between these two layers, that is around 10 billion volt. That is a very high electric potential, or electric potential difference between these two layers, and very, very little time this massive current of the order of around 1 lakh million ampere, right, start to flow between these two layers. So all of a sudden the enormous amount of the heat is produced, and this led to the heating of the air column between these two layers, right, in the basically cloud, and this heat gives an air column a reddish appearance during the lightning, and as this heated rise column expand, it produces a shock wave. That's something which results into the thunder. So it's a scientific phenomena how the lightning have been generated. Okay, so altogether it's a different phenomena. So here the scientists at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Tropical Management in the Pune works full time on the thunderstorms and the lightning, as well as to study those phenomena in the country. So here the lightning rarely hit the people directly, but such strikes are always fatal, right? So as you know that Earth is a good conductor of the electricity, right, and it is electrically neutral also, right. However, when you compare to the middle layer of the cloud, it becomes positively charged. So around 15 to 20% of the currents get directed towards the Earth during that process, right? And people are most common stuck why we call the ground currents. Here, the electric energy after hitting an object, on the ground, spread literally on the ground surface, right, for some distance, and the people in the area also receive the electric shocks. And in that process the people also die. So it becomes very, very dangerous if the ground is wet specifically, right, and it is very frequently very high chances that the ground is wet, because through that wet ground the electric shock can be traveled with much easier, and if there is any metal or conducting material on it, it can spread much faster. So water is also a conductor, as you know that, and many people are struck by the lightning while standing in the flooded paddy field or wherever the wet space is there. For the reasons, taking shelter under the tree is also dangerous, because directly the lying flat on the surface too can increase the risk. So in that respect, the people should move indoors in the storms, and even the indoors they should avoid touching some sort of a electrical fittings, wires, metals, or the water, because these are the good conductor of the electricity, and any electric shock would definitely permeate through these good conductors of the electricity. So that is what is happened. That was I was explaining you the collisions of these ice particles polarize the electric charges within the clouds. Okay, and the negative charge at the bottom of the clouds induces the positive charge on the ground, and that interaction, the negative ladders extend from the clouds and the positive streamers rise from the earth and ultimately the two joints and created a channel through which the lightning basically strikes. So that is what it happens, and the lights ultimately reach to the surface of the earth. Next is basically the Bitcoin hardware wallet. So what is that? So here the Twitter CEO had announced his payment firm, the Square, would soon build a hardware wallet to store the Bitcoin. So it's very important that such type of the hardware wallet where the Bitcoin can be stored. So what is that Bitcoin hardware wallet? Wallet is where we keep our money. So it will be a wallet where you can put your Bitcoins. It's a form of a digital currency. So a wallet will be a type of a plug-in type of device. Just you can use just like a charger, okay, or just like a USB pen drive, okay, and which can store, which can manage, or which can secure the crypto assets or the Bitcoin or the digital currencies or the cryptocurrencies. Okay, such digital assets are also linked to the cryptographic password, right, and which are also called the private keys to allow the users to access it, right, and this key safeguards cryptocurrencies from the theft and unauthorized access also. So here the asset owner, with the help of these secure hardware wallet, can access the private key, right, to buy and to sell these crypto assets from anywhere of around the world. And most hardware wallets allow the users to manage the multiple accounts through which these cryptocurrencies can be traded. And even such type of hardware wallets allow the users to connect to their Google or the Facebook accounts, right, and they are the most secure form of the storing of these Bitcoins. And most popular hardware wallets include, that you might have heard also about, the Trezor, the Ledger, the KeepKey, and the ProKey. These are the most recently the popular hardware wallets that has been specifically used around the world, right, and the hardware wallets are said to be more convenient, and they can be connected to the trading exchanges to complete any sort of a transaction in the form of these Bitcoins. Okay, so but the most important aspect is that these wallets are vulnerable to the malware, right, because they are the hard devices. The hardware wallets and the physical devices act like a cold storage for the confidential keys. So these passwords are protected by some sort of a pin, and it is making for the difficult for the hackers to extract these private keys, and their information is not exposed to the internet. But definitely they have some sort of vulnerability towards the malware, towards the cyber attacks. Okay. Now let us understand some sort of the limitations about these hardware wallets. So here the wallet is in the physical form, just like a pen drive. The device could be stolen, right? If it is stolen or missed or destroyed, right, what will happen to your Bitcoin or your currencies or cryptocurrencies? That could be used by some sort of a malicious actors to steal some sort of confidential data. And the device can also be expensive, as compared to the software wallets that we basically use. Some hardware wallets can also have some sort of complex features, right, and it will be very difficult for the first timers to use and to accustom themselves with such hardware wallets. So that is one form of the hardware wallet, that is also known as the Trezor, which is also named. Okay, next, the National Archives of India. So here the National Archives of India, the Culture Minister G. Krishan Reddy has said that the National Archive records, related to the freedom fighters would be digitized, and here the digitization of this, the records of the freedom fighters would become a part of the commemoration of the 75 years of the independence, which will be commemorated or celebrated the next year in 2022. And let us understand about the National Archives of India. It is an attached office under Ministry of Culture, and it was established in 1891 at the Kolkata as an imperial record department, and later, after when the country become independent, it become the National Archives of India. And the following of the transfer of the capital from Calcutta to Delhi after 1911, the present building of National Archives of India was constructed in 1926 in Delhi. Okay, and it was also being transferred from Calcutta to Delhi, right? And there are over 50 lakh files and the documents in the holdings in the National Archives of India, which provide the much needed information to the researchers, to the people, to the public, and to the other interested groups, right? Next, you have the Asadi Beach. The Asadi Beach is basically the auspicious occasion to the Kutch people in the Gujarat. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi have greeted the people of the Kutch specifically during the Asadi Beach, which is also known as the Kutch New Year, on the occasion of the Asadi Beach. So the Asadi Beach, which is also known as the Kutch New Year, is the second day of Shukla Paksha, right, which is the waxing phase of moon in the in the Ashad month of specifically the month of July. So here the Kutch region, or the people from the Kutch region, celebrated as this region as the Kutch New Year. So this Hindu New Year is observed in the Kutch region of Gujarat, and during this Ashadi Beach, right, some sort of a fair and the celebrations of the rains were basically celebrated, and the farmers checks the moisture, because at that point of the time the moisture came from the basically atmosphere, and that was a right time for the sowing time, right, for the crops that will have to predict some sort of the crops will do the best in the coming monsoon, right, during such type of sowing season. Okay. Next, the National Forensic Science University. So the Union Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah have inaugurated the newly built Center of Excellence for the Research and Analysis of the Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances, right, of the National Forensic Science University in the Ahmedabad. So this Center of Excellence for the Research and Analysis of Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances would help in the law enforcement agency to containing, right, the use of narcotics and the psychotropic substances in the country. So when the government was informed about that the government has some plans to establish this center, right, at that point of the time, almost 7 states of the country have expressed their desire to open the colleges in the Center of Excellence, which is affiliated to the National Forensic Science University, Gujarat, for the purpose of for the purpose of better service delivery for enforcing the psychotropic and narcotic substances in the country. So here the Cyber Defense Center and the Ballistic Research Centers, would set up in this center itself, which is a unique in the world, in the world, not only in the Asia, right, to have the self-reliance in the matter of the narcotics and the psychotropic substances, and also in the forensic sciences in our country. So that's all for today, and we will meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you. Till then, take care.